Good morning, class, and welcome to Miss Smart's Pajama Lecture. By pajama lecture, I mean that you are watching this video probably in your pajamas, and I'm still in my pajamas having coffee. So let's jump right in. This is not so much a lecture as it is me telling you what you need to highlight, annotate, take notes on, and remember in Chapter 3. Okay, in Chapter 3, you were supposed to read pages 88 through 104, and of course you read all that, right? But just to help you out, I'm going to have you highlight the parts that are the most important part of this chapter. So it's not going to be a lecture so much as me telling you the pieces of this that you need to remember the most in writing your single source essay. Now, this is basically a roadmap to writing a single source essay, and it's a really good chapter. So I've kind of picked out the important parts for you so that when you're using this roadmap to write your single source essay, you can say, oh yeah, Miss Smart had us all like that. She said that was important. So I am distilling, meaning taking the pieces out of pages 88 through 104 that you need to remember the most and refer to while you're constructing your essay. A lot of this lecture is going to include me reading straight out of the book to you. First of all, right here, if you'll turn to page 88, I'm going to read straight through the beginning on thesis is really important. So you need to bracket the whole thing or highlight it. It says that 3 features of your paper deserve particular attention. Your thesis, which presents the paper's underlying rationale, your introduction, which draws readers into the world of your subject matter, and your conclusion, which leaves readers thinking about your particular take on the subject matter. Here in this video, and in your textbook, we take a closer look at each of these crucial components. On 3.1, page 88, it discusses writing a thesis, and your textbook says, write a thesis that makes an assertion about your topic and provides a structure for your paper. You've been doing this since junior high school, so that's no new information for you. However, there was something in this textbook that expanded on the idea of thesis a little bit that I want to read to you right from your textbook, and you need to highlight this. A thesis is a 1 or 2 sentence summary of your paper's content. Whether explanatory, mildly argumentative, or strongly argumentative, the thesis is an assertion about that topic. For instance, what the content is, how it works, what it means, if it is valuable, if action should be taken, and so on. A paper's thesis is similar to its conclusion, not identical, similar. But it lacks the conclusions concern for broad implications and significance, meaning you're going to have your thesis at the front of your paper. When you go back to expand on your thesis in the conclusion of your paper, you're going to tie it to bigger implications or bigger significance. So you're basically expanding on your thesis and your conclusion. The thesis is the product of your thinking. It therefore represents your conclusion about the topic on which you're writing, which in this case is the article that I've posted on pause for you regarding whether or not college tuition should be free. Okay, now straight out of the gate, I want to say that when I presented this topic in one of my English 1020 classes, everybody's like, yeah, of course college should be free. That's the easy argument, right? Because we're like, absolutely. Think of the student loan debt that people are saddled with when they graduate college, and they oftentimes enter the workforce making way less money than they thought they were going to make and are saddled with this debt for years and years and years. So we can have all these great arguments about why college should be free. But one brave soul, when I posed this question, raised his hand, you know who you are, and said, I kind of don't think college should be free. And then he told this story about sitting at Southwest Community College next to students who don't want to be there, who oftentimes don't show up. And when they do come, they're late. They really have no investment in their college education and do very little work, oftentimes fail. And he said that it's clear that they really don't want to be here, but you've been paid money by the state of Tennessee to go. The state of Tennessee is like, here, take this money and go to college. We need our workforce to have at least an associate's degree, so we're willing to pay you to go to college so that we can meet the supply and demand of our own workforce that wants you to have an associate's degree when you go out there, at least an associate's degree. So the argument seems so simple, right? We have this need for a Tennessee workforce that has some college education, and then we have all this money from the lottery that we can pay these people to go to college. But the student's argument, which is also my argument, was that there's no personal investment, that this student has not paid to go to college, so he or she does not take college very seriously. And this was a situation that I discovered myself as a teacher at college. So there's a very valid argument that the motivation is just not there when it's not attached to your own pocketbook. But besides that, there's some evidence that what the state of Tennessee said will work, which is pay students to go to college so that we have that workforce that's college educated. There's some evidence right here at your own school, if you'll look it up, that what the state of Tennessee said will work is not working, because we have right around a 15% graduation rate. So that's 85% of our student population at Southwest that is not doing what the system of giving you free college is designed to do, right? So it's what the state of Tennessee said would work is not working. So look into that if you want to argue that hard side, that college tuition should not be free. Okay, carrying on with your textbook, you're going to see that on page 89 at the top, I need you to put this in brackets because this is something else you're going to want to distill, meaning make this important to you by highlighting or underlining. For a writer in the drafting stages, which is where you are right now, the thesis establishes a focus, a basis on which to include or exclude information, meaning it's guiding your writing. For the reader of a finished product, the thesis forecasts the author's decision. That's what you need to underline on page 89. Looking underneath the components of a thesis about 4 lines down, highlight this paragraph right here. What distinguishes a thesis from any other sentence with a subject and a predicate is that the thesis presents the controlling idea of the paper. The subject of a thesis and the assertion about it must present the right balance between the general and the specific to allow for a thorough discussion within the allotted length of the paper. The discussion might include definitions, details, comparisons, contrast, whatever is needed to illuminate a subject and support the assertion. Okay. You should be highlighting in your textbook and following along with me at this point. And if you are doing that, you're going to skip down 2 more paragraphs to the end of the page and highlight this section. So to write an effective thesis and therefore a controlled effective paper, you need to limit your subject and your claims about it. The narrowing process should help you arrive at a manageable topic for your paper. You will convert that topic to a thesis when you make an assertion about it, a claim that you will explain and support in the paper. Underneath that, where it talks about making an assertion, please highlight, underline, bold, or put a star by. However, you can say, Ms. Smart said this is important. Thesis statements make an assertion or claim about your paper's topic. If you have spent enough time reading and gathering information and brainstorming, turn the page, keep highlighting, and brainstorming ideas about the assignment, you'll be knowledgeable enough to have something to say based on a combination of your own thinking and the thinking of your sources. Continue to put brackets around this paragraph or highlight it. If you have trouble coming up with an assertion, devote more time to invention strategies. You guys learned about invention with me in English 1010. Try writing your subject at the top of a page and then listing everything you now know and feel about it. Often from such a list, you'll venture an assertion you can then use to fashion a working thesis. One good way to gauge the reasonableness of your claim is to see what other authors have asserted about the same topic. This time you're only looking at one author because this is a single source essay. So you'll be looking at what this one author has had to say and using your own brain and your personal experiences to decide whether you want to argue that college tuition should be free, which is along lines of the article, or whether it should not be free, or whether we need to revise the system and make it a little tougher for those who are getting free college education. All right, continue on. One way to gauge the reasonableness of your claim is to see what other authors have asserted about the same topic. Keeping good notes on the views of others will provide you with a useful counterpoint to your own views as you write and think about your claim, and you may want to use those notes in your paper. All right, this section brings up the point of a working thesis. Guys, when you're writing a paper, especially your longer research project that's due at the end of this semester, you're going to kind of have an idea of where you're going and kind of have an idea of where you're arguing. So you'll have a thesis that you start with. However, once you start fleshing out your claims and you start doing the actual writing of your paper, that thesis may change because you may end up, after collecting evidence and doing some critical thinking about it, you may end up somewhere totally different than your thesis at the beginning that you had. Okay? So that working thesis may change and it will turn into your final thesis at the end. In other words, like, let's read a little bit further about working thesis. Underneath those bullet points in your book on page 90, 1, 2, 3, it says, keep in mind that these are working theses that you'll be working on as you start to construct your paper. Because you haven't had a paper based on any of them, they remain a hypothesis to be tested. You might choose one and use it to focus your initial draft, and after completing a first draft, you would revise it by comparing the contents of the paper to the thesis and making adjustments as necessary for unity. The working thesis is an excellent tool for planning broad sections of the paper, but again, don't let it prevent you from pursuing related discussions as they occur to you. Meaning, don't be afraid to venture out. Like, you had this idea, like Miss Smart said, no, I don't think college tuition should be free because it just sets up students not be that motivated in the classroom because they don't have anything, there's no stake in it, right? But then in thinking critically and having discussions with my students, with my spouse, I got to thinking a little bit deeper about it and have sort of like, now I'm kind of in the middle, so I'm not quite sure that I can keep this thesis. I might have to be going somewhere else entirely, but I'm going to keep writing this paper, and when I'm done thinking and writing, then I'll go back and check and see how thoroughly my working thesis reflects my own ideas in the paper. And if it doesn't, then I'm going to revise that thesis to match my whole paper and have a whole new thesis, and that will be your final thesis. Look at starting with a working thesis, which is what you should be doing right now. This section right here at the bottom of page 90 should be highlighted, underlined, bolded, and look, I even have 2 asterisks by it. 2 asterisks means this is super important. Okay, a thesis is a summary, yet it's difficult to summarize a presentation yet to be written, especially if you expect to discover what you want to say during the process of writing, which is the way that good writing often goes. You start out, you kind of think you have an idea of where you're going, but then you do this great thinking, you do this great writing, and you end up somewhere that even surprised you. And that's the beauty of writing, right? Because you're thinking as you're writing. So, like the paper said, especially if you expect to discover what you want to say during the writing process. Even if you know your material well, the best you can do at first is to formulate a working thesis, a hypothesis of sorts, a well-informed hunch about your topic and the claim you intend to make about it. After completing a draft, you can evaluate the degree to which your working thesis accurately summarizes the content of your paper. If the match is a good one and your thesis does match what you wrote, then you can keep it, and that becomes your final thesis. But if the sections of your paper drift from the focus of your working thesis, you'll need to revise the thesis and the paper itself to ensure that the presentation is unified, that the claims that you've made in the body of your paper backing up your thesis, that there's a match there. Okay? Does that make sense? Yes. Okay. On page 91, you just need to underline this first sentence. A working thesis will help you sketch the structure of your paper because an effective structure flows directly from the thesis. Then look beyond the example, and the very next sentence, you need to also highlight the thesis is strongly argumentative or persuasive. Then we're going to the bottom of that section, and you need to highlight a couple more sentences. A focused thesis, therefore, becomes an essential tool for guiding readers. And then the next sentence in the last paragraph of that section. At this stage, however, your thesis is still provisional. It may turn out that you do research or begin drafting, and the paper to which the thesis commits you looks to be too long and complex. So we're writing within, right now, you're writing within a I think, a 600 to a 900 word count. So if your thesis is complicated and it has like, and this and this and this are the reasons why college shouldn't be free, and that shows up in your thesis, then you've committed to a really long paper, because you're going to have to prove each one of those things that you said in your thesis. So you may have to keep your thesis a little bit more succinct. Okay? All right, now I need you to turn over on page 92. And this is kind of a summary of that section. The summary says at the bottom of page 92, you'll need to highlight it. Guys, whenever the bottom of a section says in sum, that's probably going to give you the gist of the argument right there. So you need to highlight that whole thing. And this one says, in sum, for any topic you might explore in a paper, you can make any number of assertions, some relatively simple, some complex. On the basis of these assertions, you set yourself an agenda for your writing, and readers set for themselves expectations for reading. The more ambitious the thesis, the more complex will be the paper, and the greater the reader's expectations. And who is that reader? Me. Okay, so we're at 15 minutes right now on writing a thesis. So I'm going to stop this video and I'm going to pick it up with introductions, and that'll be part 2. Yeah, let's name that part 2. Right now this is part 1. Now we're going to be on part 2. See you in a moment.